great many speeches, but I've never felt I must have been before. I've been conned a little bit. I was told, would I say a few words, and I discovered I've been transformed into tonight's speaker, so much that I went out and wrote a note to myself, which I don't usually use in the car park. It is a pleasure to come here, but as I say, I hope you're not expecting a set speech, because I don't have one. And I also feel embarrassed to be talking to a group of people who are mostly indigenous who are here, very active in society, and here I am, an incomer, preaching to you. It seems to be a presumption on my part. I am an incomer. I was brought up in Cornwall, and Northumberland is as far as you can get from there in England. And if Mr. Simon has his way, it will still be as far as you can get from the United Kingdom. So I feel more and more remote. But I didn't think that I had any connections at all with Newcastle. But I found I had one slightly strange one. And I told my father that I was coming. I had been planning to go back to the States, but when I told him instead I was coming to Newcastle, my father, who was in the First World War and was captured at a very bad time, told me that he had never been in Newcastle since he was demobilized at Fenton Barracks. Well, I never knew that he'd been to Fenton Barracks, but it turned out that sometime in 1917, the 7th Battalion of the Durhams took such casualties that men from other infantry battalions had to be drafted in, so we got demobilized as one of the Durhams at Fenton Barracks. The only other place you could remember in Newcastle was Jesmond Dean. I never liked to press him on what happened in Jesmond Dean that made it memorable. Newcastle I've had, as the kind introduction said, a very varied career. But the nicest job I ever had was Vice Chancellor of Newcastle. And one of the nice things about it was that I wasn't just Vice Chancellor of University, but as you know, if you're head of a racial university, civic university, you're inevitably part of the civic scene as well as the academic scene. And I found that one of the most enjoyable parts, and I hope one of the most productive parts of my time in Newcastle. But I also learned that the Northeast has a great sort of unity, but also a fiscal tendency when it comes to doing things. And one of the lessons about that I learned from Mrs. Cookson. Catherine Cookson was a great benefactor of the university and many other things. And she was a very generous lady, a very strong-minded lady who did the benefactions she wanted to do, and none that you tried to talk her into. But she was very generous and spontaneous, and did it with the help of the small solicitors firm in Gateshead, and refused all offers of more sophisticated help. And once, for instance, I went out with my wife to walk in the Lake District and called in on her. I think she was living up there towards, up above Portriston, I think. And she chatted, and then she pulled her checkbook out of her handbag and wrote the check out for £250,000 on her knee, gave it to me and said, don't cash it till Friday. But I learned not to tell her that I wanted anything to Newcastle, or to thank her on behalf of Newcastle, because she was, of course, a staunch daughter of South Shields. And she viewed Newcastle with great deal of suspicion. Nothing like the dislike she had for Sunderland. And I discovered that was because she hadn't forgotten, as apparently South Shields hasn't, that in 1898, Sunderland dockers blackmailed apparently when South Shields dockers were on strike, and they've not forgotten it. So I learned that when Mr. Cameron talks about big society should be built through small communities, I started to wonder whether he's ever tried to do anything in a small community. I live in a village in Suffolk now, and the average congregation of church is about 40, but quite factionalized. And that's quite an achievement with numbers like that. And I feel, from what I've learned about the Newcastle Fund for the Arts and the Tyne Northumberland Foundation, its community foundation, that it has come as close as you can humanly ask to mastering that problem. It seems to me that it has succeeded in getting the loyalty and doing good to a fairly widespread community, which is not easy to pull together on all purposes. So that's one thing I learned. The other thing I learned was that, as interestingly said, I've rather sadly in the last few years lost both my wife and my daughter. And I wanted to do in my modest way something to remember them. And I found that's quite difficult because if you're a Wolfson or Selfridge or Sainsbury, you can set up an organization, give them money and tell them to hire some experts to do it. But if you don't want to put up a building or buy a bench in the park, but want to do something with people in a continuing nature, you need an organization. You can't. Giving the money in some ways is the easy bit. It's implementing the use of the money in a constructive way. And I was lucky with my daughter because I got in touch with her old college, Birmingham, Cambridge, and I've managed to fund a teaching fellowship there. And also, my daughter began to write and publish some poetry that was out. And so I set up a poetry prize at Birmingham, the national prize, not a prize for the college. And they have got to work with their name and prestige. And if you Google the James Martin Poetry Prize, it's worth doing, you'll find in the fourth year now, 3,000 applicants, distinguished judges, great success. Not down to me, but down to people in the college who designed the competition that did it. So I'm saying that everybody who wants to give money needs an implementer. And I have been stuck in thinking, what can I do in the name of my wife? I played a pretty active role up here in Newcastle and used to call me into line when I got out of line. I'm notorious for being too talkative. I thought one of the better remarks you want to say to you is you never have a thought you don't express. I can't do that for quite a while. Sadly, when we were having a drink with some friends on the patio in Washington, where we used to live some years ago, I also showed one of my other vices, which is a hypochondriac after a childhood illness. And after I'd expressed anxiety about some symptoms, she turned to the others and said, listen to him. He'll be here in a few years' time wondering where we were wrong. And it's true. They have been wrong. So I was looking for something to do in hermitry. And I was a bit lost. And then, by pure chance, I am, as you said, an honorary fellow. Not honorary president. I don't even have a dishonorable president. So I get their papers, and I learned that they had some money, and they were thinking of giving it to this organization. And they had quite a heated debate about it. They decided to do it. And one of those cartoon light bulbs lit up in my mind. That's it. That's the answer. There's the organization. And I phoned them the next day and said I wanted to do something. And they bit my hand off. And this was 2 months ago, and now I have this fund. So the other lesson I learned is the need for some mechanism for those who want to do something helpful. And I find that doing something like that is much more satisfying than writing a check to others and hoping that they make use of it and give it to the chief executive. Which I know they don't do in these organizations. So that's really all I really have to say, is that these two things about these organizations have led me to be a great admirer of them. And I think they have a good balance between looking after the interests and intention of the donors, while using their own entities. I mean, I feel myself, perhaps it's because I was the Vice Chancellor, I was a recipient of grants, is that once you've given money to someone, you've given money and it's theirs and they should do as they see fit. But on the other hand, it is nice to be kept in touch with. So I feel I have no qualifications to run an arts trust, but I know that they're thinking for. And just in a short period of 2 months, I've come to think that it's an excellent